So, are you good to go?
Yeah,
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone, again. My name is Jessica Schwartz, and I'm with the New York Community Action Project. Tonight, we're hosting this live stream to discuss the legacy of Dominique Alexander, the organization raising awareness around him, and what is being done to affect change in the community and New York City. And we are joined now by Jasmine from Declaring Justice for Domo. Jasmine, if you want to just give a brief introduction about yourself as well.
yeah. I could just say I'm part of a group of people within the community that know what it means to truly stand behind impacted families, and really, really thankful to have met other people that really understand. And um, to me, that's the work of the community, and that's the work of justice.
Right. Yeah, that's a great introduction, a great way to start tonight's live stream. So, I just have a list of some questions for you to answer and talk about the work that you and Declaring Justice for Domo are doing to keep Dominique Alexander's legacy alive. So, to start off, I'm just going to ask as an organization that supports Dominique's legacy, please give us a background on what happened to Dominique and how the NYPD acted.
Yeah. So first, before we jump into that,
Hmm.
I've said several times, and many people have been interchanging this, and I have to keep correcting myself. We always say declaring justice for Domo, but it's actually when his friend told me once that it was Damo, so people used to call him Damo, like Dominique. So we've said it several times in different ways, and so I'm just working on us getting into
Hmm.
the.
Good to know.
Uh,
Thank you for correcting.
yeah, no worries. I'm correcting myself all the time with that as well. Um, Yeah, so I'm hesitant to say that we're like a full organization because we've definitely been resistant to call ourselves that per se, and to even do anything that would make us legally something, and part of that is because we saw right away how I'll say that while it is very, very beneficial in many ways to become an organization and call yourselves this and have a mission statement and all of that, there's so much in it that um, you, it's easy to get caught up in the whole marketing and maybe I don't even know how to word it very clearly, but I'll say I've seen a lot within this work where we can all kind of get sucked into this, okay, now it has to become a thing, and now we have to market off of someone else's tragedy and trauma. Now we have to do the things. And so I'm hesitant to say organization, but at the same time, I do see the benefit because when it comes to needing more support and even looking like we are a group of people more than just like the community, because unfortunately that's not valued as much. Um, yeah, so anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, we started with at the precinct, at the 34th precinct. That's where we all met. And I always like to talk about how Joannis was the first person at the precinct by herself. Just, I mean, I don't even know if she had like a plan other than to show up. And that's kind of what we've always done, is just show up. So once we saw her show up, there were many of us who were thought we needed a plan to show up, and kind of have been putting one foot in front of the other each time. So just to go back as to why we were at the precinct, on June 9th, 2020, Dominique Alexander was found hanging from a tree in Fort Tryon Park. And after 66 minutes, the police deemed it a suicide. And the Alexander family did not believe it was a suicide. Um, the lead investigator took about 2 weeks vacation. There was very little communication with the family. And they were just left with so many questions that they still have today. 14 months later, they still have the same questions. And so much of it has been about uh, being okay with just having enough. And I've said it so many times. It's like we didn't have all the answers. They didn't have all the answers. And when you're in a space where you're communicating with a family going through something like this, there has to be this understanding that whatever's on the table has to be enough to keep moving forward. Um, so I say with that, we are a group of people who have just enough to continue to put one step before the other. I
All
do
right.
not know your question.
Mhm.
Uh,
No, that was very clear. Thank you for talking about the situation and how you all started. That actually kind of then goes into my next question of how declaring justice for Damo.
yeah, the way
Okay,
I
good.
bring it is I say Dominique,
Oh,
Damo.
of course, Damo. So that was actually going to be my next question is how declaring justice for Damo formed and what have been the different ways you all have been working to raise awareness around his legacy.
Yeah. Um, I think some of it has been about um, moving very thoughtfully. We hope to be doing that. We hope to always be doing that. We all have intentions at some points and don't always hit the mark. Um, but every time we've made some sort of move, we've thought about how it impacts, just the family and their privacy, and the legacy, and also knowing like we are not the only moving part in Dominique's legacy. Um, we are just a small fraction of people supporting it. Um, but we've done protests. We've done protests in parks specifically. We've done protests that were, interrupting dinners. We've gone to very specific locations looking for specific people to help. Um, a lot of our work has been with really small numbers. As you know, you come out and been one of those numbers, and we so appreciate it. Um, and I think that we've not shied away from what that can do, and that's one of the I think that's one of our strengths is knowing that, and not getting discouraged, because the impact has still happened. Um, yeah.
Yeah, right on. I mean, every time I've been to one of your actions, it's always very impactful, even as you said that even when they are small, I think sometimes that's the most impactful because, it's not necessarily for like anything flashy. It's to be there for Dominique and for the community. And so I've always respected the work that you all have done.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. And that actually then leads into the next question, which is about the campaign that you all have right now to put more lights in Fort Tryon. And so, how did you all, I guess, kind of decide on this being the demand?
Yeah. Because there's so much that still we don't know, and there's so much around. Like, for a while, the focus was reopen the case. And that was like the demand for months. And then the case was reopened in some way, shape, or form, but then nothing was answered still. And while it was helpful, I think it was not what was expected. The demands were further than that. At the time, we didn't have enough information to say, we specifically want this portion of the case, we didn't have all that.
Hmm.
So, asking for it to be reopened, and then we got that in a sense. But again, so many questions. And so, like I said, there's other moving parts of this. There's other people working behind the table with things that I think at some point we'll hear more about publicly. But we were like, there has to be a place for us. Now that this demand of asking them to open the case was, I guess, successful in a sense, but not quite what we wanted. What do we do to make sure this doesn't just go underneath the rug somewhere? What do we do to make sure that people are still hearing about this, that it's not part of this whole culture of erasure? How do we keep this? Um, and so we started to think about what, um, when we spoke with Dominique's mother, we were just thinking about what was it that for her resonated. Like when we talked about the park specifically, and there were a lot of conversations about cameras. And as you know, there were conversations within community about cameras and what that would do. And so we listened to community, we heard that, and we were like, you know what? Yeah, we don't need to use cameras at this time. Let's focus on, lighting. Because it was a kind of a two-part request at first, like lights and cameras, because had there been lighting, maybe someone would have seen. had to bring cameras, maybe there was some footage, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so once we started thinking about the lighting, it was like, okay. And then I walked in the park at that, like around a darker time. And I was just like, yeah, this is like, there's so many pockets that are completely dark. If you go on the Instagram for Declaring Justice, you'll see there's the video that shows this part in the park that's completely dark. And so anyway, that became a focus, but we recognized after attempting to talk to Fort Tryon Park about the lights, it was kind of getting sidetracked, like, yeah, lots of people have mentioned the lights, no problem, it'll be done at some point. And it was more like, no, we want a light for Dominique, though. We want a light that says his name on it. We want a light that says, um, we're a community that does something when something like this happens. We don't just say, oh, and brush it aside, which is unfortunately so much of the response from Fort Tryon Park. And I'm not like we're not letting up on that just because that resistance says it's even more important. I actually thought when we first approached them that it would be like, of course, I really did. There's other spaces in the park where there's memorials in a sense, but I think because we're requesting for something to be both and in it, like it's a memorial, but it's also like a statement, and it's also something that is a need in the park. And to ask for that to be both seems like um, problematic for them,
Mhm.
which I think is really symbolic. But yeah, I don't know if I answered that either.
No, you totally did. That was great. Just as a follow-up to that, and obviously you don't have to elaborate on this if you don't
Yeah,
want to, but you mentioned the security cameras and how you went more in the direction of a light versus the cameras. Do you want to explain maybe why you all decided that cameras wasn't a good idea?
yeah, so at first, like I said, there was talk about like had there been cameras, and Miss Alexander said several times like this should never happen again to anyone else. And that's been the main thing. So what needs to change? What like how many so many things need to change, but where are some things that feel closer and more tangible that we can even articulate that can be changed sooner than later? And it was lights and cameras. And we were like, yeah, we could get a camera named after Dominique in the park. But when this was put out to community, there was a response that just expressed that getting cameras in the park could cause more surveillance and could have a greater, a very negative impact on community. There's lots of things that happen in the park. There's lots of people of color in the park. Like it just wouldn't, and we totally understood that and wanted to respect that and don't want to cause any more problems in the park. So it was, um, that was just kind of like, okay, let's move forward with.
Hmm. Right, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
I think that's
didn't,
really
I
important.
didn't mention that, so thank you for asking.
Of course. And so, kind of shifting focus for a little bit, I know Declaring Justice for Damo, a lot of your events include aspects of art in your work. And what do you think is the importance of art in your movement?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've like never done social justice work without art. So for me, that's like my home. That's the way I know how to reach people. Um, and I think it's such it just kind of like blows your mind sometimes when you see something and feel at the same time. And I think art does that right away. Um, and with something where there's so many questions and not a lot of answers, uh, the abstract work of art gives us so much to um, gives us so much to like chew on and explore without needing a definite like this is what it's supposed to be. This is like that rigid, um, view of things. But my background is in ritual poetic drama within the African continuum. So a lot of that is around the idea of life, death, and transformation. The idea that story has so many questions it poses, but not a lot of answers, like a real story. So that for me says like that's where the healing takes place. And with this work, we wanted to make sure that there was not just this you know, uh, I mean, when you're dealing with trauma, it's so challenging because you want to tell the story. because some people have to hear it just like that for there to be change. But then you know that there are people that live it every single day. And I think the only way to heal and tell a trauma story is with art present at all times.
Of course, of course. That was a beautiful response to that question. It's very inspiring.
So I
So,
must
oh,
say, my studies with ritual poetic drama are from my mentor, Dr. Tanya Pettifor Waits, who's the founder of that methodology. I always must say her name because without her work, that's like what I stand
mhm,
on. So,
of course, giving credit where credit is due. And
absolutely.
mhm. And so, in like the work that you all have been doing, what are some successes that you all have had, and what are some challenges that you all have had in your work?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for this question too, because both of those are so important. And sometimes I think we have focused a lot on the challenges because there is this urgency to offer some sense of like tangible, we did it, you know, and not from a place of like we want to conquer this and that, but from a place of like progress and seeing healing and like helping the Alexander family move through this grief. Sometimes feels like if we get to this point, then maybe there was more, you know. But that some of that thinking is like pretty Western, and I don't think like that way of thinking is always the answer, especially through this type of work. Um, I'd like to say that the progress has definitely been like I think it's a big deal that the 34th precinct felt so much pressure that they opened the case again. You know, whether it was opening in the way in which we wanted it, that's a pretty big deal because it started with Joanna's one woman at the precinct every single day because she said this is important. I would have never known the story that in that way had I not experienced it from her, like walking past. I also there were two ways that I experienced this, and like got to know what happened. But for me, meeting Joanna's that day was just so like I was like, oh, she knows this is important too. Um, so I think that's progress. That the 34th precinct felt enough
Mm-hmm.
pressure. Um, the other piece I think is progress is that there are people that have stuck with this and who understand. And while the numbers may not be like, you know, in the 2000s or whatever, there are people that have continuously come back. There are people like you all who've asked us to share more and give us a platform to share these things because these are the type of things that we're able to use when we do our like conversations with the boards and we're able to take a clip from this and say like this is what happened, you know, or this is how I described this, or this is how this conversation these are all just resources. And so building community I think has been one thing that's been so successful because that's definitely happened. um, the amount of people that know, like we used to always say 50 more, that's all we need, just 50 more people to know. What they decide to do with it is what they decide to do with it. But we're looking for people like us. And every time we went out that way, I do think we found 50 people that were that passionate as we were. So I think in those ways, definitely that was that was a lot of progress and success. Um, and for challenges, I definitely think it's challenging not knowing. There's so much we don't know. You know, if I look at other stories, unfortunately, we have many stories that we can look at how things happen in their journey to justice, and we can say like, um, there's so many names I could name right now. It's just really sad to even think about that. But there's so many different stories that you can compare the campaigns and like, oh, that worked. You know, maybe I could try that here or that worked. And you know, a lot of this has been different in the sense that, you know, I personally didn't know Dominique or his family at all before this. So I'm not a family member talking about this. And myself and Angie and Catherine and Joannis and Chrissy, like we've all been at the forefront, but none of us are family. So that's something that's sometimes challenging because we're often met with, well, where's the family? And, sometimes we're like, well, they're present. We're just like doing this because we're community. And why should they have to do this? Should not have to do this at all.
Right. Oh, sorry. Were you about to say something? Oh, sorry. You cut out for a second.
Okay, I thought so. Sorry, I'm back.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. But yeah, so I feel like um, that's been challenging. I also think it's been challenging sometimes, like updating, giving updates about the progress and saying more than, we've built community. And for a lot of people, that's not enough, and I get that because so many of us are angry. So we're like, well, if it's not enough, we want to do this. How do we do this? And we've lost a lot of people who've been like following because they just felt so upset that we like there wasn't more happening, and that's been a challenge. Um, and yeah, I think those have been the big challenges. Um, and then I think something that's been a challenge, but also a really amazing opportunity is like recognizing this thing about numbers. And like, when everything, um, like there was this big uprising as if racism wasn't a thing before, with, and like everyone kind of flocked to these protests and it became this trend. And now that it's like no longer a trend as much, um, there's like a shift in participation and urgency, and now that the world is opening back up again, and so like there's I think there's this thing where we can like easily, we're all part of the world and all of the things that influence us, we can easily think like, oh, this isn't working because you know people aren't here or these numbers aren't there, you know so I think that's been a really powerful opportunity to see how, like you just said, the intimacy of the protests have such a big impact, versus sometimes being at these really big ones, which I think are great for visibility, but at the same time, it sometimes feels like, what did we march for specifically? Like, sometimes visibility is enough, but other times it's like, I don't know, And I think there's, like I said, pros, cons, plus, minus to all of these things, but um, yeah.
Mhm. No, yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with that last part. I think people get discouraged really easily if, their first protest ever doesn't bring out 1,000 people. But what's important is the work continues and that, we stand with all victims of police violence and police neglect. And so I think, yeah, that's why I really admire you all. And actually, the way I found out about you all was I was walking through Fort Tryon and there was a flyer in the park and I'm just like, see, flyering works, folks. Make
It
sure you flyer
does.
everywhere.
Let me tell you, I think that day, we put 200 flyers all around the park. We spent
Wow.
a couple hours. There was only five of us. There were five of us. I think, oh no, I had done a little bit before then. So maybe we did like 70 because I think I had done it like 3 days or something of like 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
But I still think that's so impressive of that many like all over. And they definitely were taken down, but you saw it. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right, exactly. And you mentioned this during that response, but I wanted to, raise it again, which is the fact that you all do work with Dominique's family. And what is important for, like, I guess, sort of advice you might have for organizations who work closely with families of victims of police violence or neglect, or those who want to? Like, what would you like those organizations or people who want to work with families to know?
I think it's just like, you know, there's so many times that I've I've always reminded myself like, um, because when there's protests coming up or something, you're like, oh, I want to know if this is okay, or I want to know if this is okay, and I've really kind of taken everything that I wanted to ask them. Sometimes I bring it through this process in my brain where it's like, is this important for the the overall? Like, is this a decision I can make myself? Is this, it kind of this questions of discernment around judgment and intuition. And that came from spending time and listening to them, not from like, um, because I did feel in myself this urgency at first to know as much so I could help right away, you know, but that part of that came from feeling so much pain for them and sitting in it and being like, I gotta help, I gotta help, I gotta help, I gotta do something, I gotta. And that hysteria is really old. I think it's very historic, and I think it comes from thinking that we have to solve every single problem. It comes from thinking, I mean, I could go on and on about the history, I think, of that type of hysteria and the need for answers right away. Um, and I had to just calm myself and constantly remind myself that I would have everything I needed to move forward. And if the response I didn't get back or something like that, then it's okay. Then maybe we don't make those shirts. Then maybe we don't put that flyer up. Maybe it's not time for that. Things were canceled before because I didn't feel like I had an answer enough to move forward. And I felt good about that anytime that happened. So yeah, I would say like it's all about their privacy first and foremost. It's all about their permission, and if you don't have the permission, you don't do it. And there's ways to still do aspects of what you want to do, with the with like using judgment and intuition based off of conversations. Um, but yeah, privacy, permission, and connection. Those are the three things that I think are so important. Um, I absolutely have loved just like listening and hearing them talk about anything. Just because I think that's community building to me, and a big part of the foundation of the work I was referring to is about community building and collaboration and active listening. And yeah, I don't think that you can work through trauma and healing and any of that or do that and have trust without that type of listening. Um, so yeah, that would be my advice for anybody interested in doing work like that. Yeah.
Hmm. No, great advice. So, what were the 3 points? Permission.
Privacy and connection.
I think that's a really good, succinct way to put it because, you want to remain respectful of the family while continuing to push forward and do action. And it seems like you all have found a pretty good balance in that regard.
Thanks. That means a lot to
Hmm.
that means a lot to us
Hmm.
because we've had lots of conversations. And also, you know what? The other thing, if I was to give a fourth word, it would be transparency.
Mm,
Because I've been like really honest with anything. I've been like, okay, we don't know about this, but we know this. We don't know this, or we know this. Um, uh, this is what we think here. Everything. Especially when dealing with anything money related, like
mm.
everything super transparent. Obviously, this conversation will be transparent. Like they know this conversation's happening. Um, yeah,
Oh, that's good to know. Good to know. So, um, yeah, so next I was just going to ask about what do you think are some concrete changes that need to be made for the NYPD to ensure another incident like this doesn't happen?
yeah. I think they need to talk to the family. That's all I could say. Like you
Hmm.
go right to the source, go right to, what could we have done better? Now, NYPD, I don't think they're at that point in there. There's a lot more to be worked through with them.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah, that's all I would say with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not like, I keep saying too, anytime I talk about this at all, I always say like, I'm not the family. I cannot speak for the family. Um, I'm someone that they have trusted to share, but I'm not speaking for them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, NYPD I think would need to answer to that if they were so blessed to have that conversation, you know. Um, they could learn a lot just
All right. Well, um, yeah, that's like a good start to, ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. And
from that.
unfortunately, like you said, even that alone might be a big ask of them. But
Oh, yeah, because there's so many steps ahead of that.
hmm
Yeah.
hmm all right. And so that was pretty much all of the questions regarding Dominique and y'all's work. So I just wanted to end it by asking just about how people can stay updated on the work that Declaring Justice for Damo is doing and what we can all do to support your work.
Thank you. Yeah. Um, I did mention too in our post that I wanted to update some things. So, like right now, we are working on a new campaign. Um,
Ooh,
Basically, it's still within the idea of the lights in the park, but just different approaches. Been having a lot of one on one conversations with people on the board, been messaging lots of emails. And not as much on Instagram, just because like now we know specifically who we want to talk to, so we're going right to them, um, and then just updating community as we have more information. But the petition right now that's in the link in our bio is just one of the ways that we're presenting like this is not just something that four people in the community think is important. There are numerous people in the whole state of New York, in Virginia, in Washington, and
wow.
that feel very passionate about this, that feel like something has to happen. Um, Gone to several Fort Tryon Park meetings and several crashed lots of yoga classes in the park and lots of other things like that. Um, so that's still happening. A lot of there's been some support from different, like during the election, there was lots of different support there, where people were reaching out to board members. Um, so right now, like we've, like I said, been really focused on specific board members and things like that. But we definitely still need the petition to get a little bit more signatures. We have about 650 something right
Oh,
now.
wow.
Yeah, but we'd love to get to like 1,000 at some point. We also have a GoFundMe that's for the lighting in the park. The idea with that is I had done a fellowship with Broadway Advocacy Coalition, and they're going to put some of their contribution into that. But the
Wow.
idea also with that is that that we match, the community matches half of what we're asking for the park to match with getting this light. Um, and what else? The idea also is that when we step forward, that we can talk more about what the light looks like. And I've been talking with, um, I'm trying to think of what the proper title is for someone that does design for lights, but it's not lighting designer because that's a little different. But there's like architectural lighting, yeah, in parks, just about like how to really light an area like that, because the type of lighting that is technically the only type that's legally allowed in the park is not the most updated lighting that's possible. So, lots of those like inner working conversations happening. But for right now, we could use support from community with signing the petition, spreading the word. Um, because anytime that we do a live like this or have people share, it's something that I'm able to use to create like these little mini 20-second videos.
Ooh.
And they've been really helpful when pitching things to people like, can you talk to me more about this? And then we have other conversations. Yeah, but that's right now where we are. But I think come November, we'll have more information about like where we'll be. actively outside doing things. Yeah.
All right, what a wonderful way to wrap up this live stream. Thank you so much for joining, Jasmine,
Thank
and
you. And
and for
you
sorry.
all for always showing up, and thank you so much for always thinking of us. And just like this is like the second or third time you all have invited us to speak, and just keep doing what you're doing also. It's really means a lot to know that you understand what we're doing.
Thank you. That's so kind of you to say. And so, for everyone watching, please continue to follow New York Community Action Project and Declaring Justice for Adamo and on our social media. And of course, if we have any in person events, then definitely come out and join our different groups and reach out to us directly if you want to get involved. And thank you all so much for watching and have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.